A man entered and asked if the aisle that watches had blinked yet. I thought he was joking at first. It was close to 2 a.m., that hour when the store felt suspended, like the world outside had thinned to a suggestion. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, one of them flickering in a steady, patient rhythm near the refrigerated drinks. I'd been counting the seconds between its dimming and brightening without realizing it. "Sorry," I said. He didn't smile. His eyes drifted past me, over my shoulder, toward the aisles. Not scanning, fixing, like he was checking for something that might check back. "The aisle," he said again, quieter now. "Has it blinked?" A draft slipped along the floor, cold against my ankles. The automatic doors behind him were closed. "We don't have aisles that blink," I said. Came out thinner than I meant. He nodded as if I'd given the expected answer. "Right? Not at first." He stepped inside fully, and the doors shut with a soft, airtight sigh. Something about that sound lingered, like it had sealed more than just the entrance. "Which aisle?" I asked because the alternative was standing there with him, letting the silence expand. He hesitated, then lifted a hand and pointed. Not directly, slightly off, like he didn't want to be precise. "Around there," he said. "Aisle 5. Snacks. Chips. Candy. A rotating rack of discount items that never sold. I'd stocked it earlier that night. Straightened everything. I was sure of it." I glanced over. From the register, you couldn't see all the way down. Just the first stretch, where the shelves rose like narrow walls, casting long shadows under the fluorescent spill. "It's fine," I said. He watched me, waiting. I forced a small laugh. "Look, if you need something, it's better if you check," he said. There was no insistence in his tone, just certainty. I felt a tightness settle in my chest. Not fear exactly. Something more structural, like a beam had shifted inside me. "Why?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Because if it hasn't, it will." The flickering light buzzed louder for a moment, then dimmed again. I looked back at aisle 5. It seemed longer than it should have been. Or maybe the shadows were stretching. "Stay here," I said, surprising myself. He didn't respond. I stepped out from behind the counter. The tile felt colder with each step, the air slightly different as I moved away from the register's glow. The hum of the refrigerators faded, replaced by a softer, almost padded silence. Halfway there, I noticed something off. The shelves. Not the products themselves, those were still rows of bright packaging, familiar logos. But the spacing between them felt uneven, like the gaps weren't where I remembered leaving them. I stopped at the mouth of the aisle. "Hello," I called, immediately regretting it. The sound didn't carry right. It seemed to press into the shelves and stay there. I leaned in. The overhead light above the aisle flickered once, twice. Pause. Then again. Not random, measured. Like an eye trying to close and open. I took a step inside. The smell hit me first. Dust, but older. Not the light, dry dust of a store, but something thicker, settled, like it had been undisturbed for years beneath everything else. The shelves rose on either side, just within arm's reach. I brushed my fingers along a row of chip bags. They crinkled softly, but the sound felt delayed, like it arrived a fraction too late. I walked further. Halfway down, I realized I couldn't hear the front of the store anymore. No hum, no doors, just a faint, rhythmic buzz overhead. I looked up. The light. Flicker. Pause. Flicker. Pause. It wasn't blinking evenly. The pauses were longer than the flashes, like something reluctant to close fully. I swallowed. "It's just a bad bulb," I said aloud. My voice sounded smaller now, like it had less space to exist. I turned to head back, and froze. The entrance to the aisle looked narrower. Not physically, not in a way I could point to, but the space felt compressed, as if the shelves had leaned in slightly while I wasn't looking. I took a step toward it. The light flickered again. This time, the darkness lasted longer. In that brief blackout, I had the distinct, undeniable sensation that something in the aisle had shifted position. Not the shelves. Something else. When the light came back, everything looked the same. But I knew it wasn't. I moved faster, keeping my eyes forward, resisting the urge to glance at the shelves. The feeling of being watched pressed in from both sides, intimate and patient. Another flicker, longer darkness. This time I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible scrape, like cardboard sliding against metal. The light returned. A bag of chips near my shoulder was facing the wrong direction. I hadn't touched it. I reached the end of the aisle and stepped out, the store's ambient noise rushing back in like air after being underwater. The man was still at the counter. "Has it?" he asked. I shook my head too quickly. "No, it's just the light." He studied me, then glanced toward the aisle. His expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "It's starting," he said. "What is?" I snapped, sharper than I intended. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the aisle, stopping just short of its entrance. "You stocked it tonight?" he asked. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." He nodded again, slower this time. "Then it noticed you." A chill spread through my arms. "That's not. This isn't. It watches patterns," he said, cutting gently through my protest. "Movement, repetition, people who come and go without looking too closely." "I look," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. "Not like this," he replied. The light above aisle 5 flickered again. We both turned. Flicker. Pause. Flicker. The pause stretched. Longer. Longer. I felt something shift in my chest again, that structural wrongness deepening. "It's trying to blink," he said. "Trying." My voice cracked. "It hasn't fully learned how yet." "Not until." The light went out completely. Not a flicker. A full, sudden darkness swallowed the aisle. For a second, nothing moved. Then, a sound. A long, slow exhale. Not from the aisle. From inside it. The light snapped back on. Everything looked normal. Perfectly normal. Except, the shelves were different. Not obviously. Not in a way I could immediately name. But the arrangement, it was too precise now. Too aligned. Like everything had been corrected. And at the very end of the aisle, there was a gap. A narrow space between the last shelf and the back wall. I was certain that gap hadn't been there before. The man inhaled sharply. "It blinked," he said. My mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" He didn't look at me. "It means it's finished deciding." A faint rustling came from the aisle. Subtle. Patient. I stared at the gap. It seemed deeper than it should have been. Not just a space, but an opening. Darker than the rest of the store. "Deciding what?" I whispered. He finally met my eyes. "Where to put you." The lights in the store flickered. Once, twice, then all at once. They went out. In the darkness, the aisle didn't disappear. It remained, watching. And this time, it didn't blink. The store's shelves rearranged themselves into a message I didn't want to read. At first, I told myself it was just a trick of perspective. It was close to 2:30 a.m., the slowest stretch of the shift, when the store seemed to forget it existed. The fluorescent lights hummed with a dull persistence, one near the back stuttering in an irregular flicker that made the aisles breathe in and out if you stared too long. I had been restocking dry goods, instant noodles, boxed snacks, moving on autopilot, letting the repetition carry me. That's when I noticed the alignment. The labels on the shelves weren't facing forward the way I'd left them. Some were angled, others turned just enough that their colors interrupted each other. Red against yellow, white cutting through black. It formed a pattern that felt almost deliberate. I stepped back, squinting. It didn't make sense. Not yet, just a cluster of mismatched fronts. "Great," I muttered. "Customers." Except there hadn't been any for nearly an hour. I moved closer and started fixing them, turning packages back into neat rows. My fingers brushed cardboard and plastic, each touch producing that familiar soft friction. But something felt off, like the resistance came a second too late. as if the shelf had already anticipated where my hand would go. I stopped. The overhead light flickered. For a moment, the aisle dimmed, and in that dimness, the arrangement looked different again. Not random, intentional. I blinked, and the light steadied. Everything was messy again. I exhaled longer than I meant to. "You're tired," I said out loud. My voice sounded thin, absorbed too quickly by the shelves. I returned to the counter, the small rectangle of brightness near the register offering something like safety. The security monitor displayed the store in grayscale, each aisle reduced to static angles and soft grain. Nothing moved. I tried not to look at aisle 3. I failed. On the screen, the shelf I'd just fixed shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough to register as movement exactly. But one box leaned. Another turned. I leaned closer to the monitor. The flicker in the backlight synced with the screen's refresh, creating a faint pulse. With each pulse, the arrangement seemed to clarify. I stood up too fast, the chair legs scraping against tile. "No," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was denying. I walked back. The air felt cooler in the aisle now, carrying a faint smell of dust and something older, like cardboard left sealed too long. My footsteps sounded muffled, as if the floor had softened. The shelves had changed again. This time, the colors formed something more distinct. Not words, shapes, repeating angles, lines that almost connected. I tilted my head. It was like trying to read a language I'd once known but forgotten. The meaning hovered just out of reach, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Stop," I whispered. The light flickered. When it came back, the shapes had shifted. Now they resembled letters. Not quite aligned, not clean, but unmistakably closer. I took a step back, bumping into the opposite shelf. A bag crinkled loudly in the silence, the sound stretching longer than it should have. This wasn't possible. Shelves don't rearrange themselves. I forced myself to move forward again, reaching out to fix one of the boxes. As soon as I touched it, the rest of the row shifted. Not sliding, repositioning, like something behind the display had decided on a new arrangement and the objects obeyed. I pulled my hand back. The letters became clearer. 3 shapes, uneven but legible. "You." My throat tightened. "No," I said again, louder this time. The hum of the lights deepened, almost like a response. I turned and walked out of the aisle, faster now, my steps uneven. Back at the counter, I avoided the monitor, focusing instead on the register screen. The numbers blurred slightly, the glow too sharp against my eyes. "Just coincidence," I muttered. "Patterns. The brain does that." But the thought felt rehearsed, hollow. Behind me, something shifted. A soft, synchronized rustle. I didn't want to turn around. I did anyway. Aisle 3 looked longer. Not physically, its end was still where it should be. But the distance felt stretched, like the space between shelves had deepened. The arrangement had changed again. More letters now. More precise. I walked toward it slowly, each step deliberate, as if sudden movement might provoke something. The message wasn't random anymore. It was forming a sentence. "You left." My chest constricted. The words didn't feel new. They felt remembered. "I didn't," I started, then stopped. The light flickered again. "You left me." The air grew colder. A faint ringing began somewhere behind my ears, subtle but constant. "I don't know what this is," I said, though the words felt directed inward. The shelves creaked softly, a slow adjustment. "You left me there." The sentence locked into place. The letters were unmistakable now, spelled out by packaging colors and orientations, every angle deliberate. A memory surfaced, uninvited. A room, dim, quiet, the smell of something stale. A voice calling from down a hallway I didn't want to walk. I shook my head sharply. "No." The shelves shifted again. "You left me there alone." The ringing grew louder. "I was a kid," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I didn't." The light cut out completely. Darkness pressed in, thick and immediate. In that darkness, I heard it. Not the shelves. Not the hum. Breathing. Close. When the light returned, the aisle was unchanged, except for the end. The back wall seemed farther away now. The gap between the last shelf and the wall widened into something deeper. The darkness there wasn't just shadow. It felt like space that didn't belong to the store. The message shifted again. You left me there alone in the dark. My knees felt weak. I went back. I whispered. I did. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. I'd waited. Outside. Too afraid to go in. Too afraid of what I might find. The shelves creaked. You waited. The word appeared alone. Centered. A response. My stomach dropped. You can't know that, I said. The lights flickered in a rapid sequence, like a stuttering pulse. The shelves adjusted again, faster now, almost eager. You heard me. The ringing sharpened, almost painful. I was scared, I said. I thought. You heard me stop. The air felt thinner. I struggled to take a full breath. The memory pushed forward, clearer now. The silence. The moment the calling stopped. How I'd stood there, listening, telling myself it was over, telling myself I could leave. I didn't know, I said, but it sounded weak, even to me. The shelves shifted one final time. The message completed itself. You knew. The lights steadied. For a moment, everything held still. Then the message changed again, more slowly, as if each adjustment required effort. The letters rearranged, stretching into a new line. Why did you come back? My chest tightened painfully. I work here, I said, grasping at something solid. This is just a store. The hum of the lights dropped to a low, almost inaudible frequency. The shelves responded. And oh, the word appeared instantly. This time I didn't see the movement. It was just there. No, you came back for me. The gap at the end of the aisle widened further. The darkness within it seemed to deepen, pulling at the edges of the shelves, bending the space around it. I didn't, I said, but my voice trembled. The message shifted one last time. Not back, forward. The word lingered, stark and centered. The floor beneath me felt subtly inclined, as if the aisle were no longer level. The gap wasn't at the back anymore. It was closer. I stumbled backward, but the distance didn't change. The aisle stretched with me. The shelves remained fixed on either side, their contents perfectly aligned into that final word. Forward. The store wasn't rearranging the shelves anymore. It was rearranging space, and it wasn't showing me a message. It was guiding me toward it. I turned to run. The counter was gone. The entrance was gone. Only the aisle remained, extending endlessly behind me and ahead. The light above flickered once, slowly, like a closing eye, and in the brief dimness I understood why the message had changed. Not to remind me, to decide, because I hadn't come back to remember what I left behind. I had come back to take my place with it. And this time, there would be no one waiting outside.